This land is Namkeg, or fishing place, where generations of Indigenous peoples lived and passed through for centuries. From the village upon the Namkeg River, now known as the North River, to Sachem Nanapashamet's fortification, now known as Castle Hill, the people of Namkeg farmed, fished, traded, raised families, discovered and invented, created art, and above all else, honored the lands upon which we stand today. We acknowledge that this is Indigenous land, and also acknowledge the Massachusetts tribe who continue to honor and hold this land into the present. I'd like to thank the elected officials and city councilors who are here, the city team that's here as well, and welcome to the microphone from the Massachusetts Tribal Council, Mr. Thomas Green. Thank you, Dominic.
Wunimatapan, Nuisawak Thomas Green, Massachusetts Tantawak Nuisawak Nashawak Matak, Nuchipanawak, Naponset, Mas Adchuset, Pankapowak, Opitaman, Oag, Kunipiamunaman. What I just said in the Massachusetts language is good morning. My name is Thomas Green. My name in the Massachusetts language is Spirit Tree. I descend from the Napontet band of Massachusetts who gathered at the praying town of Ponkapog. And we would like to thank all of you tribute people and welcome you all being here with us today. So first, for those of you that haven't heard me speak, I just want to give people an understanding of the word Massachusetts. It's not a word, it's actually three words. It's a description. Mas, meaning great, grand, or large. Adchu, meaning hill or mound. And Set, meaning place. Together you have the place of the great hill. And this refers to the Great Blue Hill of Milton, Massachusetts. It is the largest, the highest point in the greater Boston area, and it is the hill that the Napontet Band of Massachusetts Sachem migrated back and forth over seasonally for generations beyond counting. While I'm here, I would also like to speak, because we are here to honor the Massachusetts by raising and flying our tribal flag, I would just like to speak to the flag and in its relation to the current seal and flag of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So on the current flag and seal of Massachusetts, you will see an Indigenous man with his arrow pointing down in submission. You will also take note that Miles Standish arm and broadsword is established directly above this Indigenous man, symbolically oppressing him. So the Massachusetts tribe today, what we've done is first we've taken back our name, not as it originally was, but as it is said and spelt today, so that people can understand the correlation between the Commonwealth and the Indigenous people who the Commonwealth appropriated the name from. We've also taken back, or taken the state seal and modified it as an act of our own sovereignty and autonomy. We've removed the oppressive symbolism of Miles Standish's broadsword and arm. We've turned the Indigenous man's arrow up so that he is ready to defend his people, his culture, and his home. We've surrounded him by three sisters, squash, beans, and corn, which were staple crops grown in Massachusetts planting fields from Cape Ann to Cape Cod. We've also added the Blue Hills in the background, for which we were named. We've added the sun, because we too are people of the first light. And last but not least, we've added the symbolism of the great spirit of the hawk, which is one of the only animals that the Indigenous Massachusetts endeavored to domesticate, which they used to spot and hunt prey for them. Now that I've gotten that out, I'd just like to say thank you to all of you. for being here, for coming here to honor the Massachusetts tribe, the original indigenous inhabitants of Nam-Keek, or the fishing place. I just want to speak to the land acknowledgement that was just read by our Honorable Mayor, and why these land acknowledgements are so meaningful to the indigenous communities. Because it says by the dominant culture that we want to acknowledge your presence, both past and present. We'd like to engage with you, communicate with you openly, and build and maintain strong and healthy relations. And for that, the Massachusetts tribe is also very appreciative to the city of Salem. With that, I know that there are other people that have some things to say. I'd just like to say again, Kudabadamish, thank you all for being here today.
So we have two more speakers and then a proclamation. I'd like to welcome up our state representative, Manny Cruz.
Good morning. I'll try that again. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. Thank you for filling my cup this morning. It is a tremendous honor to be able to be here with you today. For those of you who I do not have the pleasure of knowing, my name is Manny Cruz. I'm the state representative for the great city of Salem, Nam-Keek, the fishing place, and I'm also the vice chair of the Salem School Committee. And today, when I was asked about this particular flag raising, I really wanted to be able to speak as I'm on my own journey of restoration for my own cup. As an Afro-Indigenous Latino, I often think about my ancestors, the ones who were brought on ships and the ones that were already here, the Taino people. And as I think about the sacrifices of my ancestors, I can't help but think about the complexity of the history of erasure, of genocide, and enslavement. My ancestors were the first to receive the Europeans when they arrived in El Caribe. And they were met with pain, with the erasure, with the enslavement, with rape, with brutality. And yet they persisted. And those Europeans committed not just the genocide in its physical form, but also on paper. And in my journey of self-discovery of my Taino ancestors, I learned about the meaning of a paper genocide, the ways in which dominant culture uses literature and writing to erase the identities of entire peoples. It's been incredibly difficult the last 20 years to find information, but I was fortunate to come across an Indigenous People Center in Boston. And it was there that I met the executive director who put me on a journey to self-discovery and to understand that I am my ancestors' wildest dreams, that paper genocide did not stop the resilience of the people that lived with the land, with the sea, in harmony. And as I think about my Indigenous ancestors and their descendants who call this place home, and the connections to those who were here, the various tribes, I recognize that there's so much more work for us to do to engage in restoration, whether it is through reparations, land acknowledgements, but also to address the bigotry and the racism that still our Indigenous neighbors and friends face right here in our Commonwealth. And that is why I know that with my platform and my voice, I'm going to continue to do the things that I think are restoration of dignity on behalf of Indigenous people. We still live in a Commonwealth that has depictions of art and illustrations that make a mockery of our Indigenous friends, and we have to end that. And that's why I'm super proud that working with Senator Lovely, we've signed on to the majority of the bills that have been brought to us by the Native American Council that are aimed at banning school districts from having Native American mascots, the restoration of holy names throughout our Commonwealth, and an acknowledgement that our seal and our mottos are not equitable. And so as I think about my responsibility as a descendant, I think when I came here today, I was thinking about what is the responsibility of our community. It is beyond acknowledgement. It is to listen to testament without reservation or without judgment, It is to listen to testament and to act to ensure that our Indigenous brothers and sisters, that they have a home here and that they are treated as a sovereign people. And there was one more thing that I just wanted to uplift, as today is also about celebration. Indigenous culture remains strong, not just here in Massachusetts, but throughout our country and throughout all of the Americas. And we are continuing to preserve our history, to share it with others, and that vibrancy cannot be lost. I was really heartened to take my first trip to Puerto Rico to be able to learn a little bit more this past summer about the ways in which the Taino people and their legacies remain alive through their descendants. So these types of celebrations, they do matter. As much as we must acknowledge the pain, we must also acknowledge the joy of our Indigenous brothers and sisters and neighbors. And the last piece that I would just leave you with as part of my own testament is I recently engaged in a program called North Shore Leads. And it was through that program that I had an opportunity to write a poem, which I wasn't able to find this morning, which I really regret. But there was one particular word that I wanted to emphasize. And it's an Indigenous word that was created by my Taino ancestors. And it is the word huracan, which is the word that later became huracan and then hurricane. And as I think about the blending of my own experience as an individual, I often think about that storm in its majesty. I think about the power of nature, the way that it moves others to act, and that it also can be both a destructive but a restorative force. And so as I thought about the poem that I wrote, if I can remember part of the words, I talked about the what comes after, which is the healing. First there is the destruction, then there is the healing, there is the rebuilding, and the cycle begins at times anew. And what is laid afterwards is usually a stronger foundation. And so I hope that with this flag raising today and this community that has come forth today, that we can continue to rebuild and to restore the lives and the dignity of our Indigenous neighbors. So I thank you all for being here today and appreciate the opportunity to be in community with you all.
I'd next like to welcome up our Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Regina Zaragoza-Frey.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at Salem's inaugural flag raising in honor of Indigenous Heritage Month this November. I'm deeply honored to collaborate with Thomas Green and members of the Massachusetts tribe to uplift and amplify the voices and presence of Indigenous peoples in Salem. While my role as a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Director in Salem has enabled us to further this work, I would like to acknowledge that our foundation predates my tenure. Our ongoing collaboration with the Massachusetts tribe began with the diligent efforts of Alyssa Rose Martin, community organizer for the Essex County Community Foundation, and Elizabeth Peterson, the director of the Witch House in Salem. Furthermore, throughout this journey, several organizations have provided invaluable support, including Salem State University, Salem Sound Coast Watch, and the House of the Seven Gables, among others. Our dialogue, which initially revolved around the creation of an Indigenous land acknowledgement, has since blossomed into multifaceted collaborations. Significant milestones include the unveiling of the Namkig portrait at City Hall, the construction of a fishing weir in Palmer Cove as an educational tool about our land's history and the importance of its conservation, numerous enlightening educational sessions led by Thomas Green, and the restoration of the historical record in City Hall, formerly known as the Deed, to name a few. I'm also pleased to share that this Thursday, the City Council Government Services Committee will consider the introduction of a distinctive land acknowledgement to the City Council. These initiatives, as well as this flag raising, reaffirms that our dedication to Indigenous peoples extends far beyond land acknowledgements. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to all those who have been instrumental in realizing this vision, and above all, my deepest thanks go to the Massachusetts tribe, whose wisdom and guidance promise a brighter future for Salem.
Whereas the land that is today called the city of Salem was for millennia before the arrival of Europeans here in 1626, called Namkeg, or fishing place, by the Massachusetts peoples who lived here and called this place home. And whereas Nanapashmet and many other Massachusetts tribal leaders led their people from Namkeg and the surrounding areas for millennia. And whereas Salem recognizes, values, and celebrates the many contributions made to our community, our Commonwealth, and our country by Indigenous peoples now and throughout our history. And whereas Indigenous peoples of this region and throughout this nation suffered and endured egregious acts of cruelty, exploitation, dispossession, enslavement, and genocide. And whereas Salem today is a community that celebrates and welcomes everyone, is dedicated to pursuing equity and justice, and is committed to policies and practices that seek to undo systemic racism and discrimination. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Dominic Pangallo, do hereby proclaim the month of November 2023 as Indigenous Peoples Heritage Month in the City of Salem, and call upon our public officials and all Salem residents to observe this month with appropriate ceremonies, activities, and programs to recognize and commemorate this occasion accordingly, and for all to reflect on the legacy of the Indigenous peoples of this land, celebrating their contributions and acknowledging the injustices suffered by them since 1626.
So yeah, again, I would just like to make sure to personally thank Alyssa Rosemartin, Gina Zaragoza, Elizabeth Peterson, Dakota, Barbara Warren, Michael Corley, all the people in Salem that work with the tribe so diligently and selflessly to make sure that we have a presence and a voice here in Salem. Thank you, guys.